When she said it, "We got married yesterday," my whole body went still. I thought I hadn't heard her right. I even smiled for a second, waiting for her to laugh and say it was a joke. But she didn't. Her lips stayed curled in that small, deliberate smile, the kind that isn't warm, isn't nervous, just victorious. My son stood beside her, eyes fixed on the floor, his hands shoved deep into his pockets like a little boy caught lying. And there I was, holding a cake I had spent all night baking, the smell of vanilla and sugar still clinging to my fingers. A cake for a celebration that had already happened, without me. For a few seconds, I couldn't even feel anger. It was confusion that hit first. My mind tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a courthouse wedding. Maybe they wanted to surprise me later. Maybe there was a mistake. But when she tilted her head and said, "It was a small ceremony. Only people who really mattered," I felt my knees weaken. People who really mattered. The words sliced through me quietly, like a blade dipped in honey. My son didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. He just stared at his shoes, and I realized the silence between us wasn't just awkward. It was final. I remember stepping inside their house, because it no longer felt like his or mine, and setting the cake down on the counter. It looked ridiculous there, a perfect frosted reminder of how unwanted I'd become. I asked softly, "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice cracked halfway through. She shrugged, brushing invisible dust off her sleeve, and said, "It all happened so fast." But I could tell it hadn't. There were photographs already framed, a wedding dress draped over a chair, champagne glasses in the sink. This wasn't fast. It was planned. I just wasn't supposed to know. When I left that day, I didn't cry. Not right away. I walked home slowly, every step heavier than the last. I passed neighbors who smiled politely, unaware of the storm sitting in my chest. The moment I shut my front door, the silence swallowed me whole. That's when the tears came. I sat at the edge of my bed staring at my phone, waiting for my son to call. He never did. That night, I left the light on in the hallway, just in case he decided to come home and talk. But the house stayed dark. A few days later, the whispers began. A cousin sent a photo of the wedding. Everyone dressed in white and gold. Everyone but me. My heart clenched when I saw my son's face. He looked happy, not guilty, not conflicted, just happy. The caption read, "The beautiful couple finally tied the knot." I dropped the phone. The sound echoed through the empty room. I couldn't understand it. How could a child you'd raised, fed, protected turn around and erase you like you never existed? The next morning, I went to the market. People looked at me differently. A few smiled, a few avoided eye contact. I overheard one woman whisper, "That's the mother who wasn't invited." I wanted to disappear. Shame burned in my throat like acid. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal or the humiliation of everyone knowing I'd been cast aside. But it wasn't just about being excluded. No, what hurt deeper was the realization that it wasn't an accident. She wanted to humiliate me. From the moment I met her, there had been something behind that smile, a quiet, patient kind of hostility. I ignored it, told myself she just needed time to adjust. I made her tea, bought her gifts, even gave her the gold bangles my husband had once given me. And now, she stood in my son's life like she'd built it from scratch, like I was just some old chapter she could rip out. I tried calling my son again, once, twice, 10 times, no answer. Finally, a message arrived. "Mom, please stop. We just need space." I stared at those words for hours. Space from what? From love? From the woman who carried him for 9 months and never once let him sleep hungry? I wanted to scream. But instead, I deleted the message and sat in silence, clutching the phone like it could still give me answers. Days turned into weeks. I kept hoping he'd show up, maybe with flowers, maybe with guilt in his eyes. But nothing. My house, once filled with noise and laughter, became a tomb. The clock ticked too loudly. The wind sounded like voices. I started talking to myself just to fill the air. Every night, I replayed the moment she said, "We got married yesterday." It became a loop in my head, a wound that refused to close. One evening, I saw them drive past my gate. They didn't notice me standing by the window. He was laughing. She had her hand on his arm. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, and then I saw the stranger he'd become. I whispered to the empty room, "She's taken him from me." But what happened next left me speechless. A neighbor, the one who lived across the street, stopped by one afternoon. She hesitated before saying it. "Did you know they're moving soon?" My heart dropped. Moving? I hadn't heard a thing. She continued. I overheard her saying something about wanting a fresh start, somewhere bigger, away from all this drama. I smiled politely, pretending it didn't matter. But as soon as she left, I locked my door and sat on the floor. Away from all this drama. Was that what I'd become? A piece of gossip to escape? I told myself to be strong, but strength is a strange thing. It doesn't come when you need it most. That night, I baked another cake. I don't even know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself I still had love left to give. Maybe I hoped they'd stop by, smell the sweetness from the road and remember me. But the cake stayed untouched. I couldn't eat it. I couldn't throw it away either. It sat there, like a symbol of everything I'd lost. Love, family, belonging. And then something changed. It was small, but it shifted everything. I received a call from my sister, asking if I'd seen the wedding photos posted online. I said yes, trying to sound calm. She hesitated, then whispered, "Did you notice your house in the background?" My breath caught. My house? I rushed to open the album again. There it was. My garden, my walls, my gate, all in their wedding pictures. They had used my home as the backdrop for their secret ceremony. That realization hit me harder than anything else. Not only had they excluded me, they had used my space, the home I built with my husband, to celebrate the beginning of their new life. It was as if they wanted to erase me completely, but couldn't resist using the life I gave them as a stage for their own. I sat down and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was too cruel to cry about anymore. From that moment, something inside me hardened. I told myself I would never be that naive again, but deep down I knew this was only the beginning. Because when someone starts by stealing your joy, they usually come for your peace next. And that woman, that perfect smiling bride, wasn't done with me yet. And what she did next made me realize I was never meant to be part of their new life. I used to believe that a home could protect you. That if you poured your heart into its walls, if you filled it with love, laughter, and sacrifice, it would never turn against you. But I was wrong, because one day, the very house I built with my own hands, the house that raised my son, became the weapon used to destroy me. Before all this, before the lies, before her smile, life was simple. My husband and I bought that little 2-bedroom house when our son was barely 3 years old. The paint was peeling, the roof leaked in the monsoon, and the kitchen smelled of damp wood. But it was ours. We promised each other we'd turn it into a home filled with love. Then, one winter night, he was gone. A sudden heart attack, no warning, no goodbyes. And suddenly, that promise became my responsibility alone. I worked every job I could find. Nights at the clinic, weekends sewing uniforms, even cleaning offices before sunrise. I remember counting every rupee, whispering to myself, "This is for him, for his future." I used to imagine the day I'd hand over the keys to my son and say, "This house will always be yours." I thought love would protect me from betrayal. I didn't know then. Love can be blind, and sometimes blindness costs everything. After the wedding incident, the air in the house changed. It was no longer the safe place it used to be. My son and his wife stayed over often, too often, and I could feel her presence in every room. The scent of her perfume on the curtains, her voice echoing through the hallway, even the way she rearranged the photos on the shelves. My late husband's portrait was quietly moved from the living room to the corridor. When I asked her why, she smiled and said, "It's better feng shui." I nodded, but deep down, I knew. It wasn't about energy. It was about erasure. At first, I tried to stay kind. I cooked for them, smiled when she called me mama, even though the word tasted false on her tongue. But slowly, I started noticing things. Letters in the mail addressed not to me, but to them. Utility bills, insurance forms, even a property tax notice that didn't have my name on it anymore. I thought it was a clerical error, until one afternoon I heard them whispering in the kitchen. I wasn't supposed to be home that early, but the rain had started, and I came in quietly, leaving my umbrella by the door. Her voice was low, sharp, deliberate. Once the house is under our name, she can move in with her sister. She won't even notice what's happening. My heart stopped. I didn't breathe. I stood behind the wall listening. My son's voice was softer, hesitant. She'll never agree to that. This house means everything to her. And then came her laugh. Light, mocking. That's why she doesn't need to know until it's done. What would you do if your own child started planning your eviction from the very house you built for them? I backed away, silently, pretending I hadn't heard. My hands trembled as I picked up a towel, wiping the already clean counter just to steady myself. When they came out, I smiled. My voice didn't shake when I said, "Dinner's ready." But inside me, something cracked open, a quiet, suffocating ache that no words could fix. The next few days were a blur. They acted normal, as if nothing had changed. She brought me tea, complimented my sari, and even offered to help with the household accounts. My son, poor boy, avoided eye contact whenever I tried to speak. I could see guilt flickering in his eyes, but guilt is useless when loyalty is already gone. Then I noticed small withdrawals from my savings. First a few thousand, then more. I checked my bank statements twice, convinced there was a mistake. But no, the transactions were authorized. My name was there, my signature. Except, it wasn't mine. I still remember the moment I saw it. My forged signature curving neatly across the page. I felt the air leave my lungs. I sat down on the floor, staring at that piece of paper, my reflection blurred by tears. How could someone who once held my hand while learning to write now use that same skill to steal from me? When I confronted him gently, I didn't accuse. I just asked, "Did you make a withdrawal recently?" His face turned pale. "Why are you checking my accounts, Mom?" he said defensively. I told him it wasn't his account. It was mine. That's when she stepped in, her tone sweet but venomous. "Oh, that. It was just for some wedding payments. We thought you wouldn't mind." Wouldn't mind? The money I'd spent decades saving, the same money meant for his future, was being used for secrets I wasn't even part of. I wanted to scream, but instead I just said, "I'd appreciate if you asked next time." She smiled again, that same smile from the day she told me they were already married. "Of course," she said, her eyes glinting. "You'll always be included." But what happened next left me speechless. One morning, I woke to the sound of laughter in the garden. She was there, speaking on the phone, saying things she didn't think I could hear. "Yes, it's her property now, but it'll be transferred soon. I just need her signature on a few things." My heart pounded in my chest. Transferred? Signature? I rushed back to my room, rummaging through my documents, only to find some missing. The deed copy, gone. The insurance file, missing. My hands shook as I searched the drawers, hoping I'd misplaced them. But they were gone. I confronted her that evening. "Did you take some papers from my room?" She blinked innocently. "What papers?" I told her exactly which ones. Her eyes flickered for a second. Then she said, "You probably misplaced them. You do forget things sometimes, don't you?" That sentence cut deeper than any insult. It wasn't about the papers. It was about making me doubt myself, making me question my own memory. The next few weeks became a war of silence. I avoided them. They avoided me. Every night I'd sit in the living room pretending to read, just to make sure they didn't touch anything else. My once warm, safe home had turned cold and tense, like a stranger's house where I paid rent with my dignity. One evening, I found her at my desk, rifling through drawers. When she saw me, She laughed softly. You really should keep better track of your things, Mama. She used that word again, Mama, but this time it sounded like mockery. I said nothing. I just stood there, watching her, realizing that this wasn't about property anymore. It was about power. She wanted me gone, erased, forgotten. But I wasn't ready to disappear. Not yet. The turning point came the day I received a courier, a plain envelope with no return address. I opened it absent-mindedly, expecting another bill, but what I saw made my blood run cold. Inside was a printed draft of a property sale agreement. My name was there, along with my son's, as joint sellers. The buyer's name was new to me, a real estate developer from another city. I skimmed through the document, my eyes catching on the line that said, "Transfer to be completed upon final signature." I dropped the paper. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The house, my home, was already being sold, without my consent, without my knowledge. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that maybe it was a draft or some misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew. This was deliberate, calculated, and the two people behind it were sitting just a few feet away, laughing in the kitchen, sipping tea as if nothing had happened. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed, staring at the framed photo of my husband. "You built this with me," I whispered. "I promised I'd protect it. I failed." But something in me shifted then. Maybe it was grief, or maybe it was rage finally waking up after years of silence. I realized I couldn't keep pretending. Love had blinded me long enough. It was time to see them for who they really were. I folded the sale document carefully and tucked it under my pillow. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd find out just how far this betrayal had gone. Because if they could steal my home once, they'd try again. And I was done being their fool. And then I found the first document, proof that my home was already being sold. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me anymore. That's how it began, standing in front of that mirror, my hands trembling, my face tired from too many sleepless nights. For years, I'd seen a woman who gave everything, her youth, her savings, her peace, to raise a child who became her whole world. But now, I saw someone else. A stranger with pain in her eyes and fire in her heart. I whispered to my reflection, "You let them walk over you once. Never again." That sentence became my vow. I began to collect proof. Every late-night whisper I overheard, every document that seemed missing, every strange phone number on the bills, I documented it all. I even started recording their conversations when they thought I was asleep. The first time I heard her laugh and say, "She's too old to understand how property transfers work," I felt something inside me break. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was insult. It was erasure. My own daughter-in-law was building a life on the ashes of mine, and my son. My son was helping her do it. When I finally confronted him, I didn't yell. I couldn't. My voice came out soft, almost trembling. "Tell me the truth, son. Is this your idea, or hers?" He couldn't even meet my eyes. Instead, he muttered something about not having a choice, about her managing the money. But I saw it. I saw the flicker of guilt swallowed by comfort. He wasn't trapped. He was content. That hurt more than any lie. I said nothing more. I just turned and walked to my room, shutting the door behind me before he could see the tears. That night, I opened my old steel locker, the one that had held every piece of my life since the day his father died. Inside were my title papers, my savings book, and the last family photo we ever took together. I stared at that photo for a long time. My boy had his arm around me, smiling like he used to when he was 10, when I was still his safe place. But that mother, that version of me, was gone now. I folded the picture, placed it gently inside my purse, and began packing. Leaving that house wasn't easy. Every corner held a memory. The marks on the kitchen wall from when he'd measured his height as a child, the faint scratch on the door where our dog used to paw to come inside. But memories couldn't protect me anymore. Love couldn't protect me. As I zipped my bag, I whispered, "They wanted this house. Let's see if they can live with what they've done." I went to stay with an old friend, Miriam, a woman who had known me before motherhood defined me. When she opened the door and saw my swollen eyes, she didn't ask anything. She just pulled me into her arms. That night, I finally slept. For the first time in months, I wasn't waking up to whispers or fake smiles. But even as I drifted off, part of me stayed alert, because I knew the fight wasn't over. Over the next few days, I visited the bank, the land office, and even my lawyer's assistant, quietly, without telling anyone. What I found was terrifying. The property records had been accessed online using my name. One document had been digitally signed, my signature, but not my hand. When I showed the copy to the clerk, he said, "Madam, this looks official." I just smiled and said softly, "Oh, it's very official, except the woman who signed it isn't me." I started collecting every scrap of evidence. My phone was full of screenshots, photos, and notes. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to go to the police, not yet. Because despite everything, I still wanted to believe there was a way back. That if I just talked to him again, maybe, just maybe, he'd see what she was doing. Maybe he'd still choose his mother. So I called him. He didn't answer. I texted, "We need to talk, just you and me." He replied hours later with 3 words, "She's not comfortable." I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. Not comfortable. The woman who'd taken my son, my peace, and soon my home, wasn't comfortable with my presence. That's when something inside me hardened. If they wanted war, I'd give them silence. The kind of silence that unnerves. Days turned into weeks. I heard nothing. Until one morning, Miriam handed me an envelope that had been left with her neighbor. It was addressed to me in my daughter-in-law's handwriting. Inside was a note. "Since you left without notice, we'll assume you're not returning. We'll take care of the house. You should focus on yourself." I laughed, a hollow, bitter laugh that didn't sound like my own. "Take care of the house?" I said out loud. "Oh, she plans to take care of it, all right, by selling it." That evening, I decided to go back, just for a night. Just to collect my documents and move them somewhere safe. But what I found when I stepped through that door made my knees go weak. The air inside was thick, not with scent, but with absence. My slippers were gone. The photo frames had been removed. Even the curtains I'd sewn myself had been replaced. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a stranger's house pretending to be mine. I went straight to my bedroom, or what was left of it. The doorframe was splintered. The lock broken. My heart pounded as I pushed it open. The locker was empty. Every document, every photograph, even the old jewelry my husband had left me, gone. My entire life erased. I sank to the floor, clutching my chest, the sound of my heartbeat louder than my thoughts. That's when I realized this wasn't just greed. This was erasure by design. She wanted me gone, forgotten, replaced. My son's silence had been her victory, my pain her satisfaction. But she underestimated one thing. I was still alive. I still remembered every detail, every signature, every word. And now I wasn't just a broken mother. I was a witness. And soon, I'd be her reckoning. But before I could act, something unexpected happened. Late that night, while sitting in the darkened living room, I heard the faint creak of the front door. Footsteps. Slow, careful, familiar. My breath caught. And when I turned toward the sound, my son stood there, his face pale, his eyes red. He didn't say a word, He just whispered, "Mom, I didn't think you'd come back." I wanted to scream, to ask why, to shake him until he told me the truth, but I couldn't move. The only thing I could manage was a quiet, trembling sentence. "You sold your father's house, didn't you?" He looked at me for a long time before finally nodding. No excuses, no apologies, just silence, the kind that kills love. In that moment, I felt something strange. Not anger, not even heartbreak, just clarity. I realized the woman in the mirror wasn't broken anymore. She was awake, and the people who thought they could destroy her had no idea what she was capable of next. Because if they thought taking my house would end the story, they hadn't seen what I could do when I had nothing left to lose. And when I came back the next morning to confront them both, the door was wide open. The lights were on, and every single document I'd hidden was gone. He called me Mom again that morning, the first time in weeks. His voice sounded hesitant, almost rehearsed. "She misses you," he said. Maybe we should have dinner together. Clear the air." I paused for a long time before answering. Dinner. The word rolled around in my head like a stone in a glass bowl. Heavy, deliberate, dangerous. So I said softly, "All right, let's have dinner. My house, Friday night." He didn't hear the tremor in my voice, and she must have smiled when he told her, because she thought I was surrendering. But I wasn't setting a table for forgiveness. I was setting it for truth. All week I prepared. Not the food, the evidence. I spent hours at my lawyer's office, printing documents, notarizing copies, organizing everything into neat, silent folders. The recordings, the forged signatures, the property transfer drafts, all there. I even made an extra copy of the most damning file, tucked safely away with my attorney. Every page was a story they thought would stay hidden. Every line was a lie waiting to be unwrapped. And still I cooked. Because that's what they expected of me. The tired old mother who tried to buy affection with homemade food. I made his favorite dish, the same one I used to serve him on his birthdays. The aroma filled the house, masking the tension that hung in the air like fog. I set the table just as I used to. 3 plates, 3 glasses, 1 candle. But this time there was a 4th chair, quiet, deliberate, and waiting. They arrived right on time. My daughter-in-law wore a bright smile and a dress far too elegant for an ordinary dinner. She leaned in to kiss my cheek, her perfume sweet and suffocating. My son looked relieved, like a child who thought the storm had passed. "You look good, Mom," he said. I smiled faintly. "I feel better now," I replied, and I meant it, just not the way he thought. We ate in near-perfect politeness. She complimented the food, pretending warmth that made my stomach turn. He laughed too loudly, trying to fill the silence between bites. I waited. I let them settle into their comfort. Let them believe they'd won. Then, halfway through the meal, I reached under the table, lifted a thick envelope and placed it beside the casserole dish. "Before dessert," I said softly, "there's something I need to serve first." She froze, fork midair. My son frowned. "Mom, what's this?" he asked, his voice unsure. I didn't answer. I just unfolded the top document, the forged signature on my house deed, and slid it toward him. His name was right there beside mine, written in the ink of betrayal. "That," I said, "is the price of your silence." Her face drained of color instantly. "Where did you get that?" she whispered, her voice trembling for the first time since I'd known her. I tilted my head slightly. "From the same place you hid your meetings. The same place you kept your buyer's list. Did you think I wouldn't find it?" My son tried to speak, but I raised my hand. "No, not tonight. Tonight you listen." I pulled out another document. Bank withdrawals, small amounts disappearing over months. "These are my savings. Every cent I earned for your future, used for her shopping sprees and your new furniture." He flinched. She glared at him, her mask slipping for the first time. Then I reached for the last folder, the one that made even my lawyer's hands shake when he saw it. I placed it gently on the table, turned toward the corner of the room and said, "You can come in now." The door opened quietly, and in walked a man in a dark suit, my lawyer. He didn't say a word, just gave a small nod as he took the 4th seat. The silence was unbearable. You could almost hear the sound of guilt cracking open. She stammered, You invited a lawyer to dinner?" I smiled. "I invited a witness." My son's face turned pale. "Mom, please. We can fix this. I didn't know." I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp as glass. "You knew. You just didn't care." There it was. The truth, finally naked on the table between us. I'd imagined this moment 100 times. Me crying, screaming, demanding answers. But instead, I felt calm. I wasn't that desperate mother anymore. I was the woman they underestimated. She tried one last trick. You wouldn't ruin your own son's life over a misunderstanding. Her tone was smooth, but her eyes were panicking. I leaned back, folded my hands, and said, "You already did." For a moment, no one breathed. Then the sound of my lawyer's voice cut through the air. "Mrs. Daniels, the documents are officially filed. The police will handle the rest." Her head snapped toward me. "You called the police?" I met her eyes and said, "I didn't have to. They called me." Right then, faintly from outside, I heard the rumble of an engine. 2 cars pulling up. Flashing lights painted the windows blue and red. My son's fork clattered to the floor. She whispered, "You can't do this to us." And I said quietly, "I already did it to myself for years. Tonight I stop." There was knocking at the door, firm, rhythmic, final. The lawyer stood up and opened it. 2 officers stepped inside, their expressions calm but serious. "Ma'am," one said, "we're here regarding the property fraud report." My son turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief. "Mom, please." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just looked at him, memorizing the face of the boy I raised, the man I lost, and the stranger who sat before me. They escorted them both outside, their words muffled by the chaos of footsteps and murmured commands. I stood by the window, my hand resting on the curtain. For a moment, I almost opened it, almost called out, almost forgave him. But I stopped, because forgiveness isn't what I needed. Freedom was. As the car doors closed, I whispered to the empty room, "This house has seen enough lies." And then I sat back down at the table, the plate still warm, the candle still burning. People think revenge feels sweet. It doesn't. It feels quiet, heavy, like finally exhaling after years of holding your breath. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just sat there, staring at the empty chairs, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost and everything I'd reclaimed. But as I reached for the stack of papers, I noticed one envelope still sealed, one I hadn't placed there. My lawyer leaned over, frowned, and said, "This wasn't from me." I tore it open. Inside was a handwritten note in my son's messy scrawl. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know she'd go this far." My throat tightened. For the first time that night, tears filled my eyes. He was still my son, broken, foolish, but mine. I folded the note and placed it beside my plate. "Maybe," I whispered. "This isn't the end after all." But before I could decide whether to believe that, there was another knock at the door. Only this time it wasn't the police. It was someone else. Someone I never expected to see again. And when I opened that door, everything I thought I knew about that house, and my family, changed forever. "I raised you better than this." Those were the first words that slipped from my trembling lips as I stood in that cold courtroom, staring at the boy who once called me Mama. The air was thick with judgment, not just from the people sitting in that room, but from the years of memories that now felt poisoned. My son wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept his gaze low, pretending to study the floor, as if the tiles might open up and swallow him whole. And beside him she sat, the woman who had whispered poison into his ear, pretending to dab her eyes with a tissue, though not a single tear ever fell. That the mother he broke wasn't filled with hate, just exhaustion. That her silence wasn't revenge, but survival. One evening, as the sun sank low, I found myself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in years. Not because everything was fixed, but because I finally realized something. Peace isn't something others give you. It's something you buy for yourself, one hard choice at a time. Now, when people ask why I tell my story, I tell them it's not for pity. It's not even for closure. It's for every mother who has ever been silenced by love, who stayed quiet to keep a family from breaking, even when that silence tore her apart. Because sometimes speaking your truth doesn't ruin your family. It reveals who they really were all along. And when I walk by the shore, the sea listens, as if it already knows every secret I've buried. I still think of him, yes, but now it's without anger, without fear, just a distant ache wrapped in forgiveness. Maybe that's what redemption feels like. Not the return of what you lost, but the peace of no longer needing it back. Because freedom isn't about walking away. It's about being brave enough to be seen,